Hi. Today what we're going to talk about is how to cover meetings, speeches, and press conference. This is a really important thing that journalists have to do. So the big thing to remember is you always want to be prepared when you're covering something like this, but be ready for anything. You have to focus your story. It's very important. Think about the readers and remember to use the news values. Remember the news values. So be prepared. Most meetings and speeches are deadline stories. So you want to be prepared. You want to do a lot of research before the event so that you're ready to write your story when it ends. If you can do some interviews before the event, that'll really help you. The agenda is usually available for all meetings 24 hours in advance. So if you can look at the agenda beforehand, that's really good. If you can, if you're covering a speech, find out about the person. If you can, talk to the person before the speech. Find out what the speech is about, so you're prepared and you know what you're doing. But be ready for anything. There could be a protest. What if everybody gets up and walks out during the meeting? Well, then that's the story. If there's a disagreement at a meeting, maybe that's the story. Remember, conflict is really a good news value. If there's conflict, it's going to be a good story. So go where the story goes. Be ready, be prepared, but be ready for anything. At a meeting, you're going to have a lot of different things happen. You want to focus your story. You don't have to talk about everything that was talked about at the meeting. You can focus on one thing. Speeches, some speakers are really good, but some speakers are all over the place. So you have to be able to focus that story. Your job is to focus on what the reader wants and needs to know. Focus on what the reader wants and needs to know. If you think like a reader, you'll ask better questions and you'll write a better story. Remember to use the news values. Remember the news values: impact, timeliness, conflict, prominence, proximity, the news values. Why should a reader care about the story? That's what you want to write. That's what you want to write. When you take notes during a meeting or a speech, don't try to write everything down. Don't try to write everything down. First thing you want to do is listen. First thing you want to do is listen. Get the point. What's the point? Write down key quotes and stories. But don't rely on technology. Bring an extra pen or pencil. Get a reporter's notebook. A notebook that you can hold in one hand. And because you're not always going to have a desk. Even if you have a tape recorder, take notes. Transcribing an interview takes a long time, so you want to have notes. The other thing is, what if the tape recorder doesn't work? You have to have notes. If you're at a speech or a meeting, you can interview people who were there. You can interview people who saw the speech or who were at the meeting. There's two types of sources for all stories. There's actors and experts. Actors are people who make things happen or people who are affected by what happens. So anybody who is affected by a story can be a good source. An expert is someone who's not involved but who has expertise about the subject. So that's also a good person to talk to. Don't interview random people. Don't interview random people. It doesn't even mean anything. You can't just interview anybody for certain stories. For certain stories you can, but you want to have a reason. You want to have a reason for each source. You want to have a reason for each source. When you interview a secondary source, well, when you interview anyone, always introduce yourself and tell them you're a reporter. Always tell them you're a reporter. Get their first and last names before the interview starts, and get a title. Their professional title, their major and year in school. What makes them a good source? But always get a title. And always get first and last names. You can't interview someone, you can't quote someone in the story without their first and last names. Never quote a source if you don't have their first and last name. There's no credibility. When you are interviewing people at a speech, if you're interviewing someone who attended the speech, ask about the issue. Ask about the issue. For instance, if the speaker talked about cloning, ask them what they think of cloning. Are you in favor of cloning? And don't forget to ask why or why not. Did the speaker change your opinion on the issue? How or why? Questions to avoid. What did you think of the speech? What did you think of the speaker? Those are not good questions, because you know what you're going to get? You're going to get, he did a good job. That's not a good quote. What does that tell you? That doesn't tell you anything. You have to ask, what was it that you liked about the speech? You know, and there's certain things you don't want to get, you know, an answer that's like, well, you know, he really did a good job. It's not a quote that adds anything to the story. So ask about the issues. For your leads, you want to focus on the issues, not the events. Focus on the issues, not the events. For instance, saying that the city council met is not a good lead. Saying that a biologist spoke is not a good lead. What did he speak about? What did the city council do? What did they decide? Never say gave a speech. Don't use that. Don't use gave a speech. It's boring. Instead, say spoke or discussed. Here's some leads that are a little better, but not that much. The Greeley City Council met Thursday at City Hall and passed a motion to build a zoo downtown. A biologist spoke Thursday at the University of Northern Colorado, urging his audience to rally against the cloning of cats and dogs. Those are okay, but they're focusing more on the event than on the issue. Let me show you what I mean. This is a really good lead. Greeley City Council on Thursday passed a motion to build a zoo downtown. That's an interesting lead. So you don't even have to say that they met. A biologist urged the University of Northern Colorado audience Thursday to rally against the cloning of cats and dogs. So here we go. We start right with what he said, not with the fact that he spoke. You don't have to start with the fact that he spoke. After the lead, you can have a direct quote, or you can have a nut graph that sums the story up. It's always fine to have a quote after the lead, or just follow with a nut graph. A nut graph sums the story up. Here's the idea. A biologist urged the University of Northern Colorado audience Thursday to rally against the cloning of cats and dogs. Quote, "Dogs and cats are living, breathing beings. They deserve the right to be born like you and me," said John Smith, an associate professor of biological sciences at Harvard. Smith spoke to about 200 students, faculty, and staff in Ross Hall. Okay, so there you have your who, what, when, where. in the third. But you remember, notice that you have the day of the week in the lead. That's always good. Then you have a quote. Then you have the rest of the who, what, when, and where. Here's an idea with a nut graph. Greeley City Council on Thursday passed a motion to build a zoo downtown. The motion, introduced by Councilmember Pam Shattuck, passed 4-3 after an hour-long discussion. Construction is to begin in 2010. That's an old one, but a good one. So you've got a lead, you've got a summary, and then you've got more information. So that's just an idea of how you can cover a meeting. Tell the story. Tell the rest of the story. First of all, you're going to use the inverted pyramid, most important to least important. Don't write in chronological order. Do not write the story in chronological order. It's boring. You want the most important points at the top. So you don't want to say, first he said, he went on to say, next he said, he finished by saying. That's boring. If I wanted to go to the speech, I'd go to the speech. Tell me the most important things he said. Okay, tips. Remember not to use unknown names in the lead. If you don't mention the speaker's name in the lead, mention it in the second graph. And then use the title as well. Whoops. On second reference, use last name only. Don't use a title after the first reference. And then you don't have to use a name every time. You can use he or she if it's understood that that's who you're talking about. You might have to explain things for readers. For instance, you know, if it's a doctor or a lawyer talking, they might talk in, you know, lawyer speak or doctor speak. You might have to find out what some things mean and translate that for readers. You don't want to use jargon. Ask questions. Ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask the author to explain. Ask the source to explain it. If you don't know what it means, then take it out. When in doubt, leave it out. When in doubt, leave it out. That's a lot. You know, the only way to learn how to do this is to read stories about speeches and to also to do it. So we're going to actually cover a speech. I'm going to give a speech and you'll cover it. So if you have questions about this, make sure to come and see me. And then that's it. Thanks.